Season 2 of the Pat and JT podcast.
Oh man, I'm here at last. The best time, always gonna be the best. Come on!
Exclusively on the Parkville Network.
Well, all right.
If you happen to miss our episode from yesterday, Dark Side of Elite crew, join that Facebook page. They'll answer questions about what you're going through right now with your quarantining, your kids home, spring break, school canceled, anything. And they're not doctors. They're just dudes going through it just like we all are.
And even if you don't have questions, you can just kind of see what other people are talking about.
And they're entertaining.
And they're fun. And they're fun on top of it. Today we got Tony Boone in studio with us. And Tony actually came up in a couple of our podcasts previously because we were talking with the Omaha Storm Chasers. And his official title is Media and Public Relations Manager.
Pretty big deal, Tony.
It is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Still new to me.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, congrats.
And this is your first season doing this.
This is my first season. I actually didn't start till January, which put me about 2 months behind some other new hires. And, I found out right away that a lot of things that happened for the next minor league baseball season really got started back in September. So there's a lot of catch up work. And, from the day I started, it was there was already a first game to get ready for. And it was only 3 months away.
Well, now imagine with everything going on now,
really
how much catch up you're going to have to do.
Wow. It's unreal what's going on right now.
Right. It really is. And that statement, and I think you commented on it maybe when Marty Cordero put out last week, I think, very emotional, talking about the community support and how the Storm Chasers and what the community means to the Storm Chasers. I thought it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. They kind of lay out what this means. I mean, right now with what's going on, a lot of people know everything's shut down. How does this affect just the Storm Chasers? What are you guys right now planning for tentatively?
Well, a lot of things that you were planning for now are kind of up in the air about when they're going to happen. Eventually there's going to be a season. That's the one thing that we do know as of right now, unless, the pandemic continues way into the fall, then, we're talking about something completely different. But unlike the College World Series or the NCAA tournament or even what's going on with the NBA and NHL, baseball season hasn't started yet. So as of right now, it's just the pushing back of the start date. And, everyone has been planning, whether it's the Royals in spring training or our crew with planning promotions and events. Everyone's been gearing for certain dates for certain things. And now all of those things have been put on hold and potentially pushed back to whenever.
Mm-hmm. Well, will they, just in general, try to get all the games in, like having more doubleheaders than they normally would, or just kind of shave off, maybe do a 70-game season instead of 130, 140?
Well, I think at the major league level, they will try to get all the games in, or at least as many of them as they can. I think at the minor league level, it has become more so, it's always been this way, but it's become more so, within the last probably 20 years. It's really all about development. And at the major league level, they really aren't interested, other than getting the competitive nature in your guys, in whether or not you're winning or losing. It's all about the development of the players. And I think because of that, they'll probably just shave down the schedule. They don't want to put guys who are potential major leaguers through the grind of doubleheader after doubleheader just to get a number of games in. I think that at some point what will probably happen, we'll just start our season at whatever point we're at, and you'll play it out. And if it's a 50-game season, it's a 50-game season. If it's 70, it's 70. And that's unfortunate, especially for the minor league teams themselves. But I do understand from a player standpoint of why that's probably the right thing to do.
I agree. I can see that because it kind of defeats the purpose of what the minor league teams are supposed to be doing, is getting them ready to go to the next level. And as opposed to, it's not really about winning games, although that's what the community thinks.
It's about grooming. right, exactly.
Yeah, it's really strange how that all works. And I guess that, when we grew up as fans, and, Pat was a part of this organization, a long time ago. I grew up watching it and then covering it, quite a while ago, and from a different perspective. And then more recently, with the newspaper, you're looking at it from a day-to-day basis, and, you want your local team to do well. You're invested in it. You're the person that went to Rosenblatt or has been going to Werner Park and been rooting for this team. And, it may come as a shock to you that, the Royals, although they would love for you to win, probably don't really care necessarily whether you win or not. They just want to know, is this guy ready to come help us win at the major league level? Because that's what it's really all about.
Like, oh, that's cute. You won a title, but how are you groom my guys? Let's go get them up here.
Well, this is kind of this has been kind of a fun decade for the Royals organization too, because when they went through the troubles that they had for 30 years and ended up going to back-to-back World Series and eventually winning a World Series title, you look back and you saw that the guys that won the world title won at the lower level of the minors. They won in Omaha, earlier this decade. And then they were winning in Kansas City in the middle of the decade. And now we're at that spot where we're kind of starting over again. And we're seeing that next wave come through. They won a couple of lower level titles last year. And, those are going to be the guys that are on the way to Omaha again.
That is true. Because then you get to see it in action. Because prior to that, it was just like, it was its own theater. It was its own. It was like you didn't see the connection in the bigger picture. And now it's like, oh, okay. Even though, at that time when one of your favorite players locally gets called up and it's like, oh, dang, we need him.
Right.
But
and you're like happy for him. Like, that's so cool. He's in the big leagues, but dang it. That leaves a hole at first.
This probably this probably is no surprise, but it's really easier to see the whole process now because the world we live in is so much smaller because of social media. You know what goes on every night, all the time.
True.
Before, back in the day, we knew what was happening in Omaha because it happened here. And maybe we knew what happened in Kansas City because we read about it in the newspaper or heard about it on the radio or, listened to KMA, the regional radio affiliate of the Royals. Yeah. And that's really all we knew. But now we know what happened at the levels above us, what happened to levels below us, who's coming in advance. It's a different time.
Okay, so let me ask you something because I've known you for a long time.
True.
And I made a mistake too when I mentioned when we first met.
That's okay.
That you are a sports director.
I was.
And that was at KHAS in Hastings. And you came on board. That was your first gig? It wasn't your first gig.
It wasn't my first gig. So this is going to be funny for your listeners. So long story short, I knew who both Pat and JT were long before we got to this stage of the game.
Before Pat and JT knew each other.
Yeah, right. True. Yeah, exactly. I actually got out of college and I started broadcasting in Omaha as a play-by-play guy for the local cable station, doing the Cox Game of the Weeks, which are still kind of going on right now.
Yes.
They had just restarted those up, and I found out after the fact that I was hired to do those, even though the person that hired me never listened to the audition tape that I gave her.
Wow.
Yeah, she gave it to me like 2 years later. She's like, I think you sent this to me. I'm like, you never even opened this.
Seriously? How did you get what?
Well, they were just going to start it up. I was already on staff. I'd actually started out by helping out with the Omaha Royals broadcast during the summer of my senior year.
So right place, right time.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, we're going to start these back up, and you're our play-by-play guy. I'm like, great.
We loved your tape.
Yeah, exactly.
You killed it on my tape.
Yeah, they must have loved how I sounded on this tape. And it turns out 2 years later that she never even opened it.
That's unbelievable. I've never heard anything like that before,
place,
ever.
Right time.
Yeah. Right, that's great.
So I did that for a couple of years. And at the time, we were doing also a local sports show that was kind of focusing on Omaha sports. And Gary Java, who was then had the only sports talk show in town, which is amazing now that we have full-time sports radio, on a couple of different stations. Oh, absolutely. At that time, it was the only thing going. And they had just landed the Nebraska contract, and we're going to start producing what is now Sports Nightly. I guess it was called Sports Nightly back then, but it was newer back then.
It was. That was Jim Rose doing he used to do a late afternoon show on KLIN in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And it was just this little 2-hour show that this dude, he'd walk in and do.
This dude did.
This young ginger would walk in and he was doing it. And then on top of it, he had a young ginger out front that was screening his calls by the name of John Bishop.
Absolutely.
And
it's funny how all these things have kind of played together to get to where we are now.
That is funny.
Yeah. So anyway, someone has this great idea because KCAR at the time had just landed the Husker contract, which pulled it away from KFAB for the first time ever.
Yes.
And we're going to have this great idea where we're going to have Jim Rose be in Lincoln, Gary Java be in Omaha, who you could not pick guys who were more opposite.
Yep.
I mean, Jim was always the smartest guy in the room, and Gary was the guy that you like to talk to in the locker room. And that's about the level of the conversation at the time. And these guys were going to co-host a show while not even being in the same room as each other. So
and that 20 years ago, whatever, was basically unheard of. Now you can do it a little bit easier, but back then I bet it was a train wreck.
It was a game changer though too, because it was just like, whoa, what are we doing?
This is science fiction,
right? Yeah, it was cool.
So the way this works out is that Gary suddenly isn't doing a 2-hour local sports talk show anymore. He's doing that, plus he's doing 2 hours of network on the Husker Radio Network with he and Jim. And he's the only sports guy they have at the radio station. Well, Gary also had a show on the Cox Network that we did on Wednesday nights. And I was a part of that group that kind of helped him, run that show. And he just came up to me one day and he's like, dude, we need another sports guy down here because, down in Lincoln, they have John Bishop, they have Jim Rose, they have Gary Sharp. We don't have anybody.
Yeah.
And so I left. there at Cox, and it was one of those deals where you're just out of college, so you're getting paid out of like 9 different pockets. Like, hey, if you do this, you're on staff. Hey, if you do this, you're paid talent. Hey, if you do this, you're considered a part-time employee. So
awesome.
So you're working all the time, but you're not getting any kind of benefits with it at the moment, other than just the experience of being involved in everything. So I left. I went there in radio. And we did that for a while. And but what I always wanted to really do was to call games, and there wasn't any chance to do that. It was fun being a part of that show. I look back on that experience as great. Gary and I are still friends to this day, both Gary Sharp and Gary Jama. And but this opportunity came up because my former broadcast partner, when I first started at the Cox station, had gone to KHAS TV in Hastings. And he's like, you're not going to believe this, but this guy who's done radio for a really long time out here is leaving. And they need a play-by-play guy who can do a ton of games. You're going to do high school games. You're going to do college games.
You've got to be kidding me.
And he's like, you maybe want to look at this. I know that maybe moving to Hastings isn't, what you and your new wife have in mind, but, you might want to look into this. Next thing you know, I'm working with Jill at KHAS Radio in Hastings.
That's crazy.
It really was. And that was when Dave Brock. And things have come full circle around that too. We had to Google him because we were like, where the hell is he now?
I told Jill, like, when you dropped Dave Brock's name, I had to go, what the hell happened to that guy?
Where did he go? Where did he go? But so, and might point out too, when you said wanting to be a play-by-play guy and there wasn't going to be a place for that here, and depending on the size of your markets, seriously, the larger the markets, the less you have the play-by-play local, that you get to hear those local games. And it's such a blessing in the small markets.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have those local, whether it's college or high school, and KHAS Radio, I have to say, and KICS also, which was turned into their sports station as well. But KHAS, that may
or may not have been my idea, although I'll never get credit for it.
Okay. Right?
It went classic country first before it went to all sports after I was gone.
It did.
Good Lord.
But they covered all the local high school games. I mean, it was like you could find your high school game on the radio.
And back then that wasn't that never happened.
It was all the local high schools. It was really cool, and it was very well supported by the community.
Oh, absolutely. It was super busy too.
Yeah.
I mean, like the more games we could do, the better.
Yeah.
Because at night, everything just went off. That was the way to get people to tune into your station at night. We didn't have the great stuff like we have with Jill in the morning earlier.
In the day. At the party line.
That's right. Buy,
sell, trade, giveaway, looking for items lost and
She
found.
was fantastic in that role. I
could not. Facebook Marketplace before there was Facebook Marketplace.
Right?
It really was. And the thing is that with her as the host, it seemed like a real deal. Like you felt like you were actually a part of something. No, I was just trying to call in and sell my lawnmower.
Those were some of the funniest days though, because some of the calls, there was a lady who she had bags of because she would shave her dog, and she had bags of dog hair that would make great stuffing for pillows.
Unbelievable. Like that's
right. We had a lady that was trying to sell literally a cemetery plot because she wasn't going to be buried next to that bleep, 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 bleep. Buzz. We didn't have a dump button.
I mean, but seriously though, for her to be hosting this and you never know what's coming on the next call.
There was no screener.
I'm searching Facebook Marketplace right now to see if they have dog hair on sale.
You see if they do. Yeah, we didn't have a screener. And Jim would either run the board or I had to run the board and do the show and take the calls. And we had a regular old style hand cradle phone and call. I remember calling Big Dally's Deli because they were one of our sponsors.
And it's still fantastic.
And calling them because then you'd get Mike on the phone and he'd talk about the specials for the day every day at the same time, 6 days a week. Call Mike at Big Dally's Deli, and he'd tell you what the specials
literally
for the day
Facebook
were.
Before it was, because now you can go on Block 16 every day at 11:30.
Yes.
You would throw up their specials. It's the same exact thing.
And everything was totally live.
In a market like that too, you never really fully understand the power of the marketing going on until you're on the other side of it. So after I end up moving from the radio station to the newspaper across the alley, which is another fantastic story in itself, it'd be Jill in the morning. We'd be wrapping up, at that point, the Hastings Tribune was an afternoon paper. And we'd be wrapping up the morning, and here's Jill on the radio going like, hey, she talks to Mike at Big Dally's, and we all look at each other in the sports department. We're like, yep, we're going to Dally's.
Yeah.
That's too good.
And he just sold 6 sandwiches. And there you go. And the best pickles in town.
In a market like that, couldn't beat that.
It was.
Awesome.
It's crazy. And then, okay, when you first found out that Pat, what his role was with the Omaha baseball team.
Oh yeah. So I've known who Pat was for a long time because you would have been very young and starting out down there. He was this kid that was roaming downstairs, and we were on the upper level. We had 2 levels downtown on Farnham, and so he's always running ragged down below. And we're sitting in the newsroom upstairs, kind of laughing during the day, like there goes Pat again. So we didn't necessarily know each other, but I think we knew who each other were. So I actually knew who he was. Yeah, before.
I was just trying to look busy so I didn't get fired. Like I really wasn't doing anything. I was just ADD before it was diagnosed and just wanting to. What's funny is that Scott Papik used to work down there too, and we just had him on. We're recording an episode of our podcast for yesterday, as it is in real world, but he was just on. So
that's awesome.
Your worlds are colliding, Tony.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's cool.
It was a fun place down there.
Go ahead.
So I'm up in the press box, and this is a few weeks ago, and I think I knew that you had been a bad boy there, but I had since forgotten it or whatever. And I don't remember exactly like why I was looking. I think we had maybe done we're doing a team podcast that some guys started in the off season, and I joined them on a couple of them just as an extra voice while we were interviewing somebody. So they were like wrapping it up without me, and I was like just roaming the hallway or whatever. And we just the 50 Summers documentary had just launched on iTunes and
which is amazing.
Yeah, the other digital platforms. And so I knew that the guy who had written the letter that was read at the end of the documentary, I knew he had been a bat boy too. And I'm like, hey, I wondered what years Gogarty was the bat boy. And Jeff Gogarty and I are still friends as well. So for him to randomly show up at the end of this documentary it was really cool to me. And he didn't know it was coming either. But I'm roaming down there, and there's literally a team photo from every year that there's been baseball in Omaha, at least in the Royals franchise, and suddenly there you were for 3 years in a row.
Yeah, sitting crisscross applesauce.
Yep,
right
and
in front.
First year, little carrying a little holiday weight there in the summer, and then I apparently went through puberty that next summer because I shed a little bit, little weight. But yeah, that was a very, very, very fun time.
It's funny how we all were like that. It's either you were big at that time or you were super skinny, and it was like just feed that kid a sandwich.
God, the poor kid's he ever going to grow? I mean, geez. Well, was it after that first season? Was that when one of the players offered you some money?
That was the first season. My first season.
It's a great story.
It was, it was like the first homestand, and Nashville Sounds were in town. And that was when Rob Dibble and Jeff Montgomery played for Nashville at the time. And Dibble they wanted to play Pepper, or Dibble did. And I didn't know I was 13. I didn't know how any of these guys were. They're up and comers. And like you said before, we didn't really know at that point who these guys were going to end up being huge. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll play. So I went out in the outfield and was playing Pepper with him, and he kept calling me Porky. And it's like, I'm like, oh God, a famous guy called me Porky. And I didn't think about it. So, and Jeff Montgomery heard it, and I walked back to the dugout, not even thinking about it, and he sat me down. He's like, listen, he's a jerk. I think he said some other words. He goes, but here's the deal. We come back, I think it was 6 weeks for another homestand, or 8 weeks, whatever. He goes, if you've lost 10 pounds or whatever it is by then, I'll give you $20. Wow. So I'm like, that's cool. So I did. I did. And he gave me the cash. Yeah. And then when he came, then I think that later that season or the next season, he got traded and actually came to Omaha and played for a while. So we became buddies, and
that's awesome.
Yeah. Isn't that great?
It is.
Now you're okay. What was your first love in sports? Was it baseball? Was it?
Are you talking about playing or watching?
What's your preferred to call or report on?
Oh boy. I never thought I would end up reporting on this. This was always just kind of an interest I had, and had I grown up in a different area, I probably would have participated in it, but I always enjoyed boxing. Mm-hmm. So for the whole Terrence Crawford thing to happen while I was at the World Herald,
that's cool.
Made for some unbelievable nights. And it's not lost on me that when my time at the Herald came to an end this last year, that I knew that it didn't matter what I did for the rest of my life, as long as it wasn't terrible, that this was the thing I was going to be known for. I was always going to be the guy that covered Terrence Crawford. So as far as covering goes, that ended up becoming the thing, because it was kind of a niche thing, but it was right in my wheelhouse. And, I knew on
worldwide, hell.
Yeah, I knew on fight nights that was a chance for me to really shine, because I knew that because of my background of following the sport, that I probably knew more of the ins and outs of it than, what the average person would. So I was kind of the go-between between what was happening and what this really means. And it was great to be able to share that with the audience. As far as growing up, though, I was like a multi-sport guy. I played everything, so I enjoyed everything. And I've been fortunate, going back to even, the KHAS days and all my days in the newspaper, that I really was able to cover a lot of sports. And I always liked the variety. There or some people that were always like, oh, didn't you want to cover Nebraska football? And the answer was, really no, because I didn't want to do one thing for the whole year. Yeah. There's a part of me that felt like I always cheated everyone because I had to roll into the next season because it was always starting. My beats always overlapped no matter what I did, even back in the radio days. But I enjoyed the variety of it. And, sometimes it was easier to get over a tough end of a football season when you knew that you had a basketball game on the Wednesday.
Right. That's true. Yeah,
you just really had to go on and do the next thing. And so there wasn't much time to really sit and think about, how do I really feel about this? It was just preparing for the next one.
It's true. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Tabor, Iowa, which is
I knew that.
Yeah, just off the interstate on the way to Kansas City.
That's crazy. Yeah, because my mom's family's from over in that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember that. So you understand the small town, both all three of us. That you're right. You get done with that last whatever that season was, and it just rolls into the next thing. Whether it's drama, whether it's another sport, whether it's because you're always got two or three irons in the fire, and a lot of times you're
balancing those things simultaneously. I can remember making it to state track our senior year of high school, but baseball practice had already started, and it just happened to be that our baseball coach was also our track coach. So everybody runs the poles around the entire thing at the end of practice, and hey, you guys that run at state track, you guys got 3 more laps. Keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. We're gonna do both.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
isn't that
Stupid
crazy?
Coaches double dipping. Totally forgot about that, Tony. That's funny. Yeah,
I love that. So working with the Storm Chasers, the position that they have now, was this position already there? Who was in it before?
Andrew Green was the guy that had the media relations position before, and he and I are similar in a sense of like how we go about things, and our sense of humor is very the same. So we've been good friends ever since he had that role. He came in. I had been on the Storm Chasers beat for the World Herald for a couple of years when he came in. Andrew, when he came in, was a really sound media relations guy, always had everything that I needed to cover a game, which was a big part of the role when he came in. And while he was here, he became this like social media guru. I mean, he became really good at it.
Seriously, and I wouldn't know who to have given that credit to, but the Storm Chasers social media game is incredible. Yeah. And it's innovating. I mean, it's like, oh my God, they do what? They've got, because they like bring in people to make sure all the, no pun intended, all the bases are covered.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? La ha ha.
Yeah,
but that makes sense. Instead of having people do it that don't really know what they're doing, do it right. Yeah. And people notice.
So Andrew, he was the mastermind behind the potholes game last year, which not only got attention locally, which was super funny here, but it got attention nationally because of the uniqueness of it.
But I love it, and also too with minor league baseball, it kind of reminds me of either doing a morning show or just being in radio. You're always trying to find a different angle on something going on in the community, and not necessarily make light of it, but kind of tie into it. And if you can make light of it, you're going to get more attention. And so that part of the job has to be so much fun.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
creativity side of it.
That's the part I was looking forward to when I started. I'm like, okay, I see the end result of these because I'm at the ballpark, but how did we get to that point?
Yeah.
And in that case, it was just Andrew on a slow day sitting around playing with some clip art because he's hearing everyone in Omaha talk about the potholes in town, and he's from Florida. He has no idea, like, he doesn't know what that is. A winter is or anything like that. Yeah. He was just having fun at the time, and he did that, and he's like, hey, I'm just going to drop this as an April Fool's joke. And a couple of people believed that it was really happening, and the next thing you know, it really did happen.
It happened, and we had the Omaha potholes.
The Storm Chasers staff turned it over in like a couple of 3 weeks, and next thing you know, they were doing it.
That is so fun.
Yeah. So Andrew was doing that, and he got a chance to do that only. Like he could leave the other stuff that, media relations stuff behind and just do that with the Durham Bulls, which because of the movie Bull Durham,
oh my God,
are like a historic franchise, and it gets him closer to home. And so it was a great opportunity for him.
Wow.
That's cool.
So he left in the off season, and the next thing you know, there's a media relations spot open. My time at the World Herald was over at that point. And one of the things I said to my wife, and she's like, oh no, what are you going to do now? And everything like that. You took this buyout, and and
now what?
There's
no other paper in town.
Yeah, there's this legit concern about, what are you going to do? And this opened up. And so I just kind of reached out in the moment and said, hey, I don't know what you're thinking about doing with Andrew's position, but, we can take this a different way. I can't do what he did, but I can do what I do, and we can, kind of see what happens with it. And I think that they were kind of thinking the same thing, at least some of them were. And, the next thing you know, here we are starting in January
probably
with an
didn't
opportunity to do all kinds of things.
Probably didn't even read anything that you sent them, just like your first job. Just got the job.
Hey,
Like, I don't know.
This guy's available.
Let's get. Don't look at his stuff. I'm sure
No, it
it's
is.
fine.
I feel extremely blessed that this has worked out the way it has. And I know that the best days of it are going to come ahead because, we're at a time now, with the way regular traditional media works, that you kind of have to tell your own story. And, with myself on staff, and we have a new radio guy coming in who's been doing some AA ball and some other sports from the East Coast, but he has a background in a lot of different things. The marketing team is already kind of in place when I joined. So I think there's a chance here to really create some really cool stuff from the Storm Chasers that are going to be both serious and fun, and maybe some of, both at the same time.
Yeah.
We can do a lot of the fun things going forward. And I look at this as, the first step in what could be a long-term relationship with myself and the club that, I already cared about because I grew up watching it and I'd been covering it for the 5 years before.
Yeah. That's true because the prior guy wasn't from here. It's like this is you've grown. You've been around this team for years.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's a
from growing up watching at the time,
Yeah.
like when Pat would have been there, to my first job out of school, we were working and broadcasting Omaha Royals games on the
Yeah.
local Cox station. 5, 6, 7 times
Was
a
Frank
year.
Atkinson still there at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And check this out. Frank is still an official scorer out at the ballpark.
Is he really?
And he and I have become incredibly close friends
I
because
love
we sit next to
Frank.
each other out there.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
he was such a good guy. I remember going on the road with the Royals sometimes, and I didn't even think about radio ever in my entire life back then, but I'd always gravitate to him because I loved his stories. Whip your vision into shape right there, yo, with Kugler Vision. We love that they're a supporter of our podcast.
Absolutely. They've got some great things that are happening on their website. If you haven't been there recently at kuglervision.com, it already was so user-friendly. If you'd thought about having any of the procedures done, and so many different procedures, it's not just one procedure, one size fits all. But interestingly, you'll find over 600 5-star patient reviews, which is amazing. The number of people that are taking advantage and saying, you know what? 2020 is going to be my year. And I think there were a couple of them that were talking about making improvements, that 2020 is the year. Right?
Yep.
That they're ready to go. And one of
Absolutely.
the first ones was vision.
I said what Gary said too. Dr. Kugler's office is amazing. They are amazing because you have cookies and they have delicious flavored waters.
They
and,
do.
Oh, and then they're also great doctors too.
And that too, don't
Yeah.
forget. They said that the staff made the procedure a breeze. That's from Natalia. I especially enjoyed the surgery prep in a massage chair, covered by a blanket, drinking some tea. I was relaxed, anxiety gone. I wish I'd done this years sooner. Now, to make it even simpler, you can text them. The number to text is 72000. You want to text C Omaha, 2 words, to 72000. I did that. And you will get back a response that will first ask you to confirm. So I text back yes. And then it sent me a link. And when you go to the page, it of course welcomes you. And then it's got some real quick questions about what it is that you're looking for. And then I got a follow-up phone call real quick. And super nice. Nicole called, and she's there just to make sure that you got the information you wanted. And if you had any further questions, she was there to help you out.
Get that consultation now at Kugler Vision. You can also go to kuglervision.com.
And tell them Pat and JT sent you.
He is a really good dude.
Yeah.
And this has been fun because Frank's son, Andy, has come and started running the pitch clock for us in the press box too. And, there's been days where Frank and Andy were both there, and there were days where Frank wasn't there. And I remember a day where, his son knew that I knew his dad from radio. And I said that your dad probably doesn't know this because I've never said anything to him about this. But I go, when I was, in college and, you first start broadcasting games, this just in, there's no training for that.
No.
I'll never forget the first Nebraska football game I broadcast on the campus radio station. I remember throwing it to the break during the pregame and looking out and seeing then 70-some thousand people. And I'm like, wow.
Oh my God.
I really need to not be nervous about this because this is happening. And I may never get the shot to do this again.
Right.
Because you don't know if you're going to be any good at it or not.
It's true.
And so you're always kind of listening to other people and things like that. And I knew from the beginning that, dude, you talk way too fast for radio. So basketball was great. Baseball was probably not going to be my best sport because I just naturally wanted to talk so fast.
I'm out of material, man.
But Frank was the guy who was here locally. And so when I was younger, I would listen to Frank, and I started doing it more so at this point because this is what I wanted to do. And I told Andy in the press box, it was either last year or the year before, I learned how to pace myself when broadcasting a baseball game by listening to your dad. He worked by himself, which is what I was going to be doing out at KHAS.
Not easy.
he allowed me to understand there can be dead air. You don't have to be talking all the time, but you have to keep the fans engaged. And Frank was always good at telling stories during the broadcast, and he was incredibly funny with, kind of a dry wit.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, the young guy working on the little O2 TV crew here at Cox, and like Frank would say something on the air and I'd be like laughing through the headset. And everybody's like, what are you laughing about, dude? And I'm like, didn't you hear what Frank said?
I'm truly
and
listening.
Everybody's like all focused. Like, I'm running the camera. I'm in the truck. I got the replay duties. And I'm like, oh, did you hear what Frank said?
I'm listening to the show.
Exactly. I'm listening to the game while we're working. And so anyway, Andy just looked at me like, wow, this guy, learned something from listening to my dad, because
That's cool.
much like my son, he didn't know me as the broadcaster. I've been the sports writer his entire life.
Right.
So
That's true. How old is he?
he just turned 21. So last
God.
night, which would have, at the time we're recording, would have been St. Patrick's Day, had to be the first I am 21, but we're in a pandemic on St. Patrick's Day.
You're like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's a bullet on that one.
Sorry that worked out like that, but that's how it is. He's
We'll
been
get
21
22.
for a month.
Right? Oh, man. That's kind of cool, though, because you're right, because he didn't see how you started.
Right.
He wasn't aware,
Right.
at that time of what was the broadcasting side of things. That's kind of cool.
It was really fun. And I don't remember what led to this one night, but at some point I found a tape, and when we're talking tape, it was like a cassette tape, and it would have been a broadcast from the KHS days or whatever. I'm like, hey, I ran across this or whatever. And so I put it in because my wife, and we've been together for, I have to do the math real quick. I think it'll be 14 years this year. And we've been married for the last, 8, I think. She had no idea. She knows those stories, and she's heard me tell stories about Jill, but she had no idea who I was back then or whatever. And, Peyton's mom would remember me from back then, but she didn't. So here's my son, who didn't know me as a broadcaster, and my wife, who didn't either. And suddenly they got a chance to listen to me do that.
That's
and
cool.
Yeah. I think there was a difference between there was humor involved, and there was actually kind of a respect involved. Like, wow, you really did used to do that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they were laughing hysterically because I can't believe that's you.
That's
Right.
honestly, do you
That's
remember what
awesome.
game that was?
No, I mean, I want to say it was either a football game or a baseball game. It was definitely a Hastings College game from the KHS days, and I don't remember why or how I came across
Right.
it.
Isn't that
at the
crazy
time.
though? That's the house I lived in Hastings was right between the ballpark, the baseball park and the Hastings College out on 2nd Street.
Yeah.
Was where we were. And so I could hear them calling. And I remember a kid named Monte Cristo in the late 90s that ended up playing in Nebraska.
Yeah, he was from Kearney, I think. but they
Originally,
ended up
and the
playing down
name
there,
always caught my, because we were literally one row of houses, and there was the wall for the ballpark where we were, so you see all the lights, and you always hear that name. That name always caught my ear, because I'm like, who would name their kid Monte Cristo? That's just so funny. And the next thing you know, you hear it for the next 10 years.
Yeah, right.
Which was awesome. But oh my God, yeah, a lot of great memories. That's awesome.
My one memory, and I'll try to keep this PG
that's right.
because this is going to be my go-to story from tell me about your radio days. And so I tell the story about the day that Tom Osborne announced that he was going to retire. There was kind of an inkling the night before that something was going to happen along those lines. And just like Jill with, doing Party Line, there were other duties that came along with, being at a small radio station. And she can tell you, I'm sure, back in the day, I absolutely hated sitting on the board. Hated it. Hated it.
Any studio time, that wasn't your favorite place to be.
No, absolutely. And it was
sometimes
for anybody.
Super boring.
very boring.
But when I came on, I was the new guy, and everybody had been there for a little while.
You got to go run the farm report.
Yeah, exactly. So you go do this. So my shift was after the newscast at noon, and to be on the board till 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So I would go in there, and I'd be taking in my spotting charts for the football game for the weekend, or working on the basketball material for the game that night, or whatever. And basically, it was 3 hours of whatever, and you never heard from me at all. And I remember Jill early on saying something to me like, you can really engage with the audience during this whole time. And I'm like, I'm playing music from an era I don't know. My dad
Michael
was
Bolton.
Exactly. My dad was older from this,
Actually,
and I go,
it's probably the 70s.
yeah.
It probably was the 70s.
I pride myself on being the guy that grew up in Southwest Iowa listening to rap music. We are so far out of my
We're
wheelhouse right here.
so adult contemporary. Oh my God.
Not rap.
Nope.
So anyway, you could not get out of that no matter what. You were on lockdown for whatever your shift was. that day. So anyway, it happened to be the day that Osborne's going to retire, and the place just vacates. Nobody's there. I mean, even the gal that runs the front desk is nowhere to be found.
When?
Yeah. So I am just stuck. And I'm just looking around for like somebody come bail me out because I'm our sports director and I need to be in Lincoln because this is happening.
Yes.
And Jill's the first person that walks in afterwards. And as I said, I'll keep it PG, but I may have shouted, and what I said might have not been politically correct in 2020. But I basically made reference to that this was the biggest sports story that was going to happen in our state in the decade. And I'm standing here playing John Denver Christmas music. And so the John Denver Christmas music gag has been running. And so she just looked at me like first stunned, I think, that I just said that. And then she just busted out laughing. And I just like kind of ducked my head, walked back in and played Wonderful Christmas Time. Or something like that.
That's what we were staying in our lane. We were staying in our lane. Sucked, but we were staying in our lane.
That'd be tough.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was those days that were a lot of fun and learned a lot of things working in a small market.
I think I appreciated it a lot more like after the fact.
Yes.
I really did.
Same here. It's true.
It's usually how it is with everything. Like you don't appreciate it till after it's over and you look back like, God, I wish I had taken more advantage of
I'm glad it happened because it did. It prepared for a lot of things, just wearing different hats and having to appreciate just doing things that you may not want to do, playing Christmas music.
I can't imagine. I mean, having automation where you could do that now. It's like one thing because you could step out, but having to be back every 2 minutes and 45 seconds because those are fast songs.
For the songs. Yeah.
The funny thing about that is I'll still hear songs that we played on KHAS on whatever radio station at the time. And I'll be like, you know what this was?
Yeah.
This was the go-to song when you had to go to the restroom.
It's
because,
true.
you know, if you could throw on Baker Street, you had like 5 minutes and 46 seconds to dart out of the studio, run down the hall, go to the restroom and get back before you needed to go to break.
You had your songs for one and you had your songs for two. Yes. any Meatloaf song was a 2 song. Ones were the 3.5, 4 minutes if you really could.
I don't know if you're like this, but can you still like envision the colored index cards that have the name of the song? I can see the name of the song, the type, the red line across the top of the early 80s or whatever. I can still envision those in my head. And we're like 25 years later.
When it was played, and that was when you got to pick your music to a degree. There was a clock, but you got to pick your music, and we never got to do that in our situation.
Right.
That was chosen for us by somebody else. Just decided what songs you were going to be playing. So that gave a lot more. It was a lot more personal, but I would have liked to see you pop the mic a little more often.
Yes.
Anyway,
just a little worst DJ ever.
Tony, thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, absolutely.
You're awesome.
We'll keep in touch though, as far as what's coming up with the Storm Chasers. And we would, trust me, we'd love to do anything we can with you guys. And we're hoping we've had Marty in, have you in. I'm hoping to hook up with Gary and get a chance to talk some more about some of the stuff coming up this year. And I know it's hard for you guys right now, but we'll get back on pace.
I just hope everybody understands that all the things that were happening before are still happening, just without set dates right now. And eventually the season's going to happen. And
it's going to happen.
It's going to be, the ballpark's going to be a place to be. It just may not be, next month when we all thought it was going to be.
Exactly.
But we'll get to it.
Super.
Thanks,
you.
Tony. We appreciate it. It's Pat and JT on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening to our podcast.